The Mouse and the Feather. Listen closely, because this story begins with a sound so small, so ordinary, that most creatures would never give it a second thought. Fwip. A single feather drifting through the air. To most animals of the forest, a falling feather was nothing more than a harmless whisper of the wind. But to one little mouse named Tallow, it was an insult. From the moment he first opened his eyes beneath the hollow roots of an old oak tree, Tallow hated feathers. He hated how they tickled his nose when birds preened overhead. He hated how they floated unpredictably, never landing where he expected. He even hated how they looked. Soft, delicate, fragile. Everything he believed he was not. Tallow prided himself on being tough, practical, and grounded. Feathers? Feathers were for birds. Tallow preferred things with weight. Pebbles, nuts, bark, anything that stayed where he put it. So whenever he found a feather near his nest, he scowled, grabbed it by the shaft, and flung it into the wind with a muttered, "Useless." And that might have been the whole story, if winter hadn't arrived early. The first storm rolled in one moonless night, sweeping through the forest like a ghost with frozen fingers. The wind moaned, the snow hissed, and in Tallow's tiny burrow, cold crept through every crack like a silent intruder. Tallow curled in on himself, shivering. His nest of moss and leaf scraps, usually enough for a mild winter, wasn't ready for this sudden plunge of frost. Every breath he exhaled puffed into a trembling cloud. Every heartbeat felt slower, weaker. He tried to warm himself with twigs. He tried piling leaves higher. He even tried stomping his paws in anger, but they only went numb. Finally, desperate and shaking, Tallow poked his head outside, searching. That's when he saw it. A single feather caught in a thorn bush, quivering wildly in the icy wind, glowing pale against the snow. Tallow froze, almost offended by the sight. Of all the things the winter storm could deliver, food, bark, even warm fur, why this? But then the wind roared, and a razor of cold sliced through him so sharply that his stubbornness cracked. He trudged forward, pulled the feather from the bush, turned it over in his paws. For the first time, he really felt it. Light, but warm. Soft, but strong enough to hold its shape. Delicate, but comforting. Tallow carried it back to his nest, muttering, "Just this once." He tucked the feather beneath him like a cushion. The change was instant, a small pocket of warmth blooming through his chilled bones, a softness that held him, a comfort he hadn't realized he was missing. That night, for the first time all winter, Tallow slept without trembling. And the next morning, when he emerged, he didn't fling the feather away. Instead, he whispered, almost embarrassed, "Thank you." Days passed. The storms went on. Tallow collected more feathers, blue jay feathers, sparrow feathers, even a hawk feather he found at the edge of the clearing. He built himself a nest so warm, so soft, that the cold could only press its face against the door and sigh in defeat. When spring finally melted the last of the frost, Tallow climbed out of his burrow with his whiskers held high. Not just stronger, but wiser. Because he had learned something the forest had known all along. Sometimes the things we dismiss, the things we push away, the things we think have no use in our lives, are the very things that might save us when the world turns cold. And ever since that winter, whenever Tallow sees a feather drifting lazily through the air, he no longer scowls. He nods, smiles, and says, "You never know what small things can warm a weary heart." If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to help the channel grow.